Part 10. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Witch John Word. Chapter 91. Chapter 91, Hold on, don't laugh out loud. Lee Baiken listened to this. I saw what Lan Yan handed over. The oil floating on it. Sunian also stood up slowly at this time and adjusted his sitting posture to watch the show. The domineering president in a suit and leather tie, his mouth is full of oil after eating, and his eyes are full of affection when he looks at the heroine. This picture is so beautiful, I really don't dare to think about it. Lee Baiken looked at his body and turned to Lan Min. Looking at the thermos box in Lan Min's hand. The oil floating on it really made him want to vomit. Jian'er, I knew you were the best to me. He looked at his hand and took the thermos box from Lan Min's hand. Lan Min was also relieved when Lee Baiken took the incubator. When she received Sunian's WeChat message saying that Lee Baiken was injured, she panicked. She always got the news about Lee Baiken as soon as possible, but now she even contacted Lee Baiken. No word on any injuries. Even though Lan Min still comforted herself that Lee Baiken did this because he was afraid of worrying herself, so he hid it from herself, but she was still very panicked. Especially when I came to the ward and saw Lee Baiken walking towards Sunian. But now, seeing Lee Baiken's familiar expression, Lan Min was really relieved. But she thought of what Sunian said before, and added, Baiken, don't worry, the money to buy this is my own, I earned it from my work, and it has nothing to do with Lin Yuan. Even if there is, then it doesn't matter. Speaking of it, sometimes I really feel that I should thank Sunian. If it weren't for Sunian, how could I eat the food you cooked by yourself? Sunian looked at Lee Baiken and the others and yawned subconsciously. Can you please stop going through the process? This is really a waste of time. Lee Baiken looked at the floating soup that was filled with a layer of oil. Then he heard Sunian's voice, Lan Nian, why are you here? After hearing Sunian, Lan Nian immediately looked over, why can't I come here? As Baiken's sister, how can I not hear, and what the is going on? I just left Baiken temporarily, and he got injured, how could it be such a coincidence? Sunian looked at the heroine in front of him. If you didn't know better, you would have thought that she had hurt Lee Baiken. But she was waiting for this. Sure enough, after Lan Min said this, Lee Baiken immediately held the thermos cup and drank the broth directly. Seeing him drinking so happily, Sunian's expectations also dropped. A normal person would definitely not be able to drink such a greasy soup, but Lee Baiken doesn't seem to be a normal person. But Sunian Gang was confused. Lee Baiken rushed directly to the bathroom. Lee Baiken really couldn't understand why this plot controlled his body. But it still gave him feelings. Have the ability to get rid of the feeling for him. Now Lee Baiken really felt like his bile was about to vomit out. Instead, Sunian nodded thoughtfully. It turns out that the second male lead is really bored. I thought it was something given by the female lead, and the second male lead wouldn't think anything of it. Lee Baiken. While Sunian was watching the show, Lan Min appeared in her sight with a look of jealousy. Sunian, what have you done to make Baiken like this? If something happens to Baiken, I will never let him go, it's yours. What did I do? You have to ask what you did for Baiken. Baiken eats what you made, and that's it? Hold on, it's absolutely impossible to laugh out loud and keep on with this play. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Witch John Word. Chapter 92. Chapter 92 Lee Baiken, no need to. I did everything according to your words. When he said this, Lan Min suddenly realized, it's you did this on purpose, you did it on purpose, you just wanted to use my hand to harm Baiken, how can you have such a big intention? Sunian cleared his throat and started operating immediately. Do as I say. I'll ask you to eat shit. Will you go too? Sun Yan walked towards Lan Zhen. The only explanation is that you have no intention at all. Lan Zhen, please be honest with me. Are you a traitor sent by Huo Linyuan to deliberately harass Baikan like this? I didn't. Since Sun Yan chose to do this, of course he had thought about how to deal with it. How could this heroine be her opponent? If not, then you don't have to use your brain. You are what I say. I said I am Baikan's wife. Every time you give me a bunch of reasons to think that I have bad intentions. Why don't you think that I have bad intentions now? Bad. Speaking of these words, Sun Yan walked directly to Li Baikan's side. I plan to give a touching performance. But when he saw Li Baikan's pale face, he couldn't say anything. Why are you so pale? No way, I just want to make Li Baikan feel sick. Who let this guy deliberately torment me? I never thought about what would happen to him. Immediately he reached out his hand to help Li Baikan up. Li Baikan's body is about 1.8 meters tall, so his weight is at that level, and Sun Yan would have almost fallen if he didn't. Seeing Lan Min reaching out, she responded directly, "Are you sure you can carry Baikan with your small body? If you didn't pay attention and Baikan fell to the ground, are you responsible?" These words made Lan Min immediately take back his hand. In this way, Sun Yan directly helped Li Baikan to the bed in one breath. Sun Yan originally thought of putting the person on the bed and then calling the doctor. Who knew that just as he was helping the person to the bed, he seemed to trip over something suddenly, and then he fell directly on Li Baikan's body. And her and Li Baikan's lips were connected. The look in their eyes. Damn it, this plot can happen to me. Am I going to be successful as a supporting actress? What are you doing? Lan Min's anxious voice sounded. Sun Yan came back to his senses only after hearing Lan Min's voice. I actually took advantage of the male counterpart in front of the heroine, ha ha ha, it was really exciting. Li Baikan also breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Although I still feel uncomfortable now, at least I have regained the initiative. Sun Yan left Li Baikan's lips, and said casually under Lan Zhen's scratching eyes, "Lan Zhen, what do you mean by looking like this? Baikan and I are husband and wife. What's wrong with doing something intimate?" Then he simply kissed Li Baikan the face again with lightning speed. After all, you can take advantage, so why not? Lan Min looked at Li Baikan, expecting Li Baikan to reprimand Sun Yan loudly. But Li Baikan didn't make any movement. At this time, Sun Yan walked up to Lan Min in an instant and said in a sharp tone, "Look at Baikan like this, does he still have the energy to talk to you? Or Lan Min, please explain, why are you so excited? Don't you think of Baikan as your own brother? Are you jealous? Since I am so powerful that Baikan is unlucky, then I will help him and stimulate the heroine for him." Li Baikan, who is adjusting his condition, no need to. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 93. Chapter 93, if a professional vicious female supporting actor becomes vicious, she will even be afraid of herself. Who said that? Don't talk nonsense. I'm talking nonsense. I talk nonsense no matter what. You have to take a stand in everything you do. You don't even know your own position. You come to say these things to me. Don't you think that what you are saying now makes no sense at all? So the voice of reading was sharp. If a professional vicious female supporting role becomes vicious, she will even be afraid of herself. She looked at Lan Min. I saw Lan Min's lips trembling slightly. It seems that the heroine is really angry to the extreme. The next thing is that someone shows up to make the decision for the heroine, and then makes me suffer severely. Hee hee, I wonder if Lee Baiken still has the energy to make the decision for her now. Thinking of this, Sunian turned around and looked at Lee Baiken. Unexpectedly, he saw Lee Baiken spread out on the bed, looking like mud. Why is this guy like this? Now it's his turn to star. Why is he paralyzed like mud? Lee Baiken sneered a few times in his heart. He feels that this so-called plot is still a little bit humane. Just like now, he has no strength at all. Even without touching Sunian now, he has gained control of his body. But now his whole body was limp and he had no strength at all. He now felt that his stomach and even his whole body were filled with the smell of fat. Even if this world is really a novel. But doesn't this Lan person have any brains at all? If she believed in Sunian so much, logically speaking, how could she believe in Sunian? Anyway, whoever decides for Sunian now has the final say. He has no strength at all. Sunian took a few more glances at Lee Baiken and found that he didn't move, so he jumped directly on Lee Baiken. Baiken, don't listen to Lan Min's nonsense. I just accidentally saw something and sent it to Lan by accident, who knew that Lan actually believed it. I didn't know that Lan would prepare such a thing for you. Lee Baiken looked at the woman in front of him. He couldn't help but said, if you squeeze out some tears at this time, the effect might be better. Sunian, who was serious about acting, was stunned when he heard this. She raised her head and looked at Lee Baiken for 3 seconds. Tears, this is okay. Since you, a licking dog, have made this request, then I will definitely satisfy it. Isn't it just tears? Can this be difficult for me? I'm a professional vicious supporting actress. Sunian took a deep breath and then held it out. Soon tears appeared in the corners of my eyes. Lee Baiken, there is no need to be so professional. Baiken, I have been staying with you all the time these days. Don't you know how much I feel about you? If you ask who in the world wants you to recover quickly, then it must be me. Get well soon. Once you get better, I won't have to stay with you, this bitch. Ah, he smells so strong, I feel like vomiting when I smell it. Sunian silently moved his body, trying to stay away from Lee Baiken. But how could Lee Baiken let Sunian go? Immediately, he pulled Sunian into his arms. Sunian's eyes are worth it. In fact, in Mary Sue, the domineering president in the domineering novel is worth hundreds of billions, is as rich as a country, can cover the sky with one hand, and will feel tired even if he eats fat meat. Especially now that Lee Baiken's body smells like meat. This guy smells really strong. With his current smell, when a stray dog sees him, his eyes will definitely glow green. I am going to die. It smells so strong. Why don't you hug the heroine? You want to hug me. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 94. Chapter 94. Fortunately, this didn't kiss me. However, Sunian could still feel how hot the heroine's gaze was at this moment. If Sunian's guess was correct, Lan Min would like to take her out of Lee Baiken's arms now. Hee, although this guy is as greasy as a ball of fat now, I guess the heroine now wants to take me out of his arms, and then be held by Lee Baiken like this. Lee Baiken felt a little unhappy when he heard Sunian complaining that he looked like a piece of fat. But after hearing this, he couldn't help but look at Lan Min. As expected, I saw Lan Min's resentful eyes. He just hugged Sunian tighter. Holy shit, why is this guy holding me tighter? Does this hateful licking dog want to strangle me to death with his arms? This licking dog is too vicious. Looking at the people hugging each other like this, Lan Min felt an indescribable discomfort in his heart. Did Baiken really believe what that woman said? Could it be that the friendship they had had for so many years could not compare to this woman? Lan Min felt that she couldn't let Sunian succeed. She took a deep breath and suppressed the grievance in her heart. Baiken, What happened this time was that I was wrong. I was too worried about you, so I didn't do it at all. I didn't care about your true situation. Don't worry, I won't let this happen again. But Lan Ji has finished publishing his long article. Li Baikan didn't listen at all, and didn't even look at her. Li Baikan just looked at Sunian. I have never been treated so coldly by Li Baikan before I returned to Lanzhou. But I really don't blame Li Baikan for this. It's because Li Baikan really doesn't have much energy to devote to her now. The reason why this is like this is because Sunian said in his heart, fortunately, this licking dog will not kiss me. Thinking of his current state, well, fortunately, I am a vicious female partner. When Li Baikan heard this, there was a smile in his eyes. Since this is the case. Just when Lan Min saw Li Baikan ignoring her, he took a step forward. Unexpectedly, he just saw Li Baikan lowering his head and approaching Sunian, as if he wanted to kiss her. Lan Min's eyes are worth it? Of course Sunian's eyes are worth it. You have to know Li Baikan's mouth now. She immediately ducked back. You dislike me? Sunian's body suddenly froze. Since Sunian is so good at acting, Li Baikan can also do it. Otherwise, wouldn't it be in vain for him to listen to Sunian's voice for so long? Li Baikan then spoke, I suddenly feel that you are quite good. After all, if a person really puts his mind on another person, it can be seen from some small things. These words made the faces of the two women present change. This stubborn licker must have done it on purpose. It's like if I don't kiss him, then I don't love him. No, I don't like this licking dog in the first place, so according to this logic, I really don't have to risk my nausea to kiss him. If he's verd. Lan Min didn't expect that Li Baikan would be like him because of this matter. Baikan, do I really know that I was wrong? Li Baikan finally laid his eyes on Lan Min. 3 feet of ice is not as cold as a day. Your previous attitude and the current situation, I really feel bad for you. Do you only have Huo Linyuan in your heart? After saying this, Li Baikan suddenly felt that it was good to be controlled by the plot when facing Lan Min, the so-called heroine. It's even more disgusting to say it in person. Thank you all for your support. The editor has informed me that I have passed the test. The next round will be tomorrow. Please continue to work hard and help me pass, this is really the last chance. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 95. Chapter 95 is good, there are new ideas. These words immediately blocked Lan Ren. I've told you many times, and it's like this every time. You always find excuses to leave. Everyone's bottom line is limited, so I hope you can give me a result. When Li Baikan finished saying this, he suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. That bowl of broth just now was indeed a bit too strong. Now that Li Baikan thought about it, he felt very uncomfortable and wanted to vomit. Baikan, why are you doing this to me? Can't we just be brothers and sisters? Wasn't it good that we were like that before? Why do you want to change? Lan Min said with tears in his eyes. Sunian couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. Hey, there is nothing new at all. If I am not wrong, then this Lanzi will definitely say next, I have always regarded you as my brother, the person I am closest to and the person I care about most in this world. Why are you forcing me like this? I have always regarded you as my brother. Even though we are not related by blood, I still regard you as my brother, the person I am closest to in this world and the person I care about most. Why are you forcing me like this? Sunian raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard this. Oh, there is something new. Not bad, actually a bit innovative. These messy thoughts made Li Baikan, who was originally serious, a little unable to maintain his expression. Lanji, I will give you one last chance. If you find excuses to leave again, or if you use any method to delay, I will put it down today. This is your last chance. If you don't cherish this opportunity, then we won't meet again from now on. Lee Baiken said with a serious face. He also wanted to know, if the so-called male and female protagonists Lanzi and Huo Linyuan appeared, then if Lanzi did not appear in front of him, would it be possible that Lanzi would not be affected by Lanzi? Lan Min's tears kept falling. Why do you always force me like this, Baiken? As Lan Min's cry sounded, Lee Baiken felt his heart aching slightly. Gradually, the pain became more and more painful. Damn it, what kind of plot is this? This world is not just about love, can't it be something else to me? Sunian looked at Lan Min and felt that this so-called heroine had really refreshed her knowledge. Although she knew that she was currently in a world of Mary Sues, she couldn't be such a Mary Sue, so she had better pretend to be a little bit. Sunian thought of this and looked at the man beside him. What is going on with this Lee Baiken? Why does he look like he doesn't want to continue licking the heroine? When he thought of this, Sunian's heart suddenly tightened, and his expression suddenly became serious. This setting of Lee Baiken is to lick the heroine crazily and mindlessly. Why is this happening and why has it changed? If Lee Baiken really changes, what should I do? Sunian immediately began to panic. Because once the plot changes too much, even if she has lived once and has gone through the plot of the novel, she cannot guarantee the next plot. Lee Baiken snorted coldly in his heart when he heard Sunian's words. This woman finally knew that he was starting to change. He felt that he had to find an opportunity to let this hateful woman know that he was no longer the Lee Baiken he once was. What will appear in front of her in the future will definitely be a brand new Lee Baiken. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 96. Chapter 96 looks like a dog seeing shit. Lee Baiken felt better because of Sunian's words. He also decided that he was right to do so. I immediately looked at Lan Min coldly and planned to continue. But before he finished speaking, his heart felt as if someone had stabbed him hard, and the binding force struck again. Now is the critical moment. How could Lee Baiken let the plot constrain him again? Immediately grabbed Sunian's hand tightly. But before Lee Baiken had time to breathe a sigh of relief, he lost control of his body again. Lee Baiken. What's going on? Why is he obviously having intimate behavior with Sunian? Why are you still losing control of your body? The key point is that this loss is different from the last time. At this moment, he felt a huge pain in his heart. It seemed as if a pair of invisible hands were holding his heart. Not only did Lee Baiken feel severe pain, but he also saw himself throwing away Sunian's hand and running directly towards Lan Min. Jian'er, please stop crying. I was joking with you just now. I really love you so much. I want to push you. I thought you liked me a little bit. If I push you, then you will admit your love for me, but I didn't expect to force you into this. I'm sorry, I was really wrong, don't be sad. Lee Baiken. Immediately, he heard Sunian let out a sigh of relief. I was scared to death. I thought Lee Baiken had changed, but he turned out to be more licky. Becomes more licking. These words really made Lee Baiken want to die at this moment. What does it mean to become more licking? Jian'er, I really want to love you, I want to love you crazily, I even think you are my life, do you know? I just saw you in pain, and my heart felt like needles pricking me, but I told myself in my heart that I have to be patient and endure well. As long as I endure it for a little longer, I will be able to hear the words of love for me from your mouth, but I really can't bear it. I can't bear to see your pain. Although Lee Baiken didn't want to admit it. But this plot really made him more lickable. This really made Lee Baiken want to go crazy. But I really just regard you as my brother. I have tried to love you, but I really can't do it. My heart is small and can only accommodate one person. Lan Min's big watery eyes, he stared at Lee Baiken and said. For the first time, Lee Baiken felt really disgusted when he did this to Lan Min. Although Lee Baiken knew very well that Lan Min was also controlled by the so-called plot, her current behavior really made Lee Baiken disgusted. What, you once tried to love me, Lan Min, do you know? As long as you say this, even if it means that I die immediately, then I will be willing to do so. Sunian has been standing by and looking at Lee Baiken. Seeing the light in Lee Baiken's eyes, he couldn't help but clicked his tongue twice. This guy's eyes are so bright now, just like a dog seeing should. No, it should be that a dog's eyes are not as bright as him when seeing should. With the heroine Lan Min saying so many things, it's up to this guy's eyes. The only thing left in my ears is the sentence, I also tried to love you. When it comes to dog licking, if Lee Baiken dares to be second, then no one dares to be first. Although Lee Baiken couldn't see his face. But, just hearing what Sunian said, his mood didn't get much better. What on earth is going on with this so-called plot? End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 97. Chapter 97. I fell into the trap of this woman again. Lan Min was also relieved because of Lee Baiken's behavior. After Lee Baiken finished speaking, she reached out and covered Lee Baiken's mouth. Baiken, I don't allow you to say this. What does it mean for you to die? You must not talk about death. You must live well. I hope you are in good health. Sunian also thought Lan Min was sincere when he said this. It's so touching, but it's a pity that Lee Baiken, the licking dog, won't live much longer. Just when Sunian was enjoying watching the show, Lan Min suddenly changed the subject. Baiken, what happened this time was all my negligence, so you better not blame Sunian, it's all my fault. Sunian. Loy, I'm just a soy sauce maker on the side. Do I need to use it like this? When Sunian came into Lee Baiken's sight, Lee Baiken, who was originally suffering from heartache, felt inexplicably better when he saw Sunian's depressed look. Sunian, it seems that I really underestimated your viciousness. I am too kind to be deceived by you, but it is absolutely impossible for you to deceive me with your methods. At this point, Sunian also knew that his soy sauce was really unstoppable. I'm vicious. I've already said what vicious things I did. Lan Min didn't take you to heart at all, that's why it happened like this. Baiken, why didn't you listen to me? Why am I doing everything wrong? Sunian quickly entered the role of a resentful woman. What do you know? Didn't you hear it? You're already trying to learn to love me. How could you not take me to your heart? Lee Baiken. These words really made Lee Baiken couldn't help but think, if he died, would it be the end? But just after this thought appeared, Lee Baiken remembered that Sunian planned to use his wallet to support the pretty boy after he died. Lee Baiken felt that he was still alive. Sunian quickly walked to Lee Baiken's side. What about me? You have obviously started to waver just now. Have you started to try to love me too? Tell me, even a little bit, just a little bit is okay. Not at all. Impossible, you can't have nothing at all, you were clearly shaken just now. Sunian reached out to grab Lee Baiken's hand. But this time she was blocked by Lan Ren before she could catch him. Lan Min stood in front of her and Lee Baiken. Sunian, I thought you were sincere before and that you wouldn't mess around. It seems that I really misjudged you. You can really do anything. Out. I can do anything. I am indeed able to do anything. I was willing to please you for him before. I once humbled you to please you, but even so, Baiken didn't want to look at me. Why does Baiken still love you so much no matter what you do? How can I not be as good as you? Sunian shouted at the top of his lungs. But when he finished yelling, he swallowed quietly. Damn, I was a little too anxious when I spoke just now and almost choked me to death. Hey, it seems I should pay more attention. Lee Baiken couldn't help but lose consciousness when he saw Sue's voice was hoarse. Even following Sunian's words, he became worried. But after hearing this, Lee Baiken cursed in his heart. I was fooled by this woman again. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 98. Chapter 98. Is it appropriate to help others here? There is nothing about you that is inferior to me, but you and Baiken have no fate. You have to know that fate is very mysterious. Sunian raised his eyes and looked at Lan Min. Lee Baiken started licking again? Are you starting to feel proud? If that's the case, then if I don't use my skills more powerfully, I won't be a vicious female supporting character. Lee Baiken was still a little worried when he heard Sunian's similar words before. But now that Lee Baiken heard it, he just hoped that Sunian could do more hard work. Then Lee Baiken looked at Sunian, pushed Lan Min away violently, and kissed him on the lips with lightning speed. Lee Baiken was stunned. The reason for this was that Lee Baiken knew very well how disgusting she felt because of what she had just eaten. But now, Lee Baiken also felt that his body slowly relaxed, and that mysterious power disappeared. Hey, with this sip of oil, I feel like I won't have to eat anything fishy in the next half-month, because this sip is really enough. When Lee Baiken heard this, he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Sunian immediately turned his head and looked at Lan Min. Can you do this? It's obvious that it can't be done. First of all, Baiken is a man after all, and a normal man at that. Lan Zhen, do you want him to be alone for the rest of his life? Do you want him to stay with you like a jade for the rest of his life? Seeing Lan Min like this, Sunian snorted arrogantly in his heart. If Lan Min, the heroine, didn't ridicule me, then I wouldn't do this. Who asked her to ridicule me first? Lee Baiken looked at Sunian. Suddenly he discovered that although Sunian looked very unreliable, it seemed that she had always followed the rules and found the method that suited her best. You can have a better time within the rules of the game. Just like using Lan Ren to make such disgusting things for yourself to take revenge on yourself. However, Lee Baiken's thoughts were quickly broken by Sunian. Because Sunian said, maybe you hope that Baiken will watch you and Huo Linyuan being sweet for the rest of his life, and he will make a living by himself every night. Lan Min, can you really bear it? Sunian, Lee Baiken interrupted coldly. But now that Sunian is in charge, how can he care about this? Don't you think you are stingy? Is this your friendship? Lee Baiken immediately dragged the person back. Baiken, I just want to stay by your side. I can do anything you ask me to do, and I am willing to do it. Lee Baiken. Now Lee Baiken thought about Sunian's complaint that he was the number one licker. Who is better at licking, him or this woman? Stop talking, okay. Why can't I say, I am the only one in this world who can do this for you? After saying this, Sunian stepped forward and hugged Lee Baiken. Baiken, I beg you, please just do it. Try to love me, just once. Haha, the heroine stopped talking, I won. Lan Min's face is already ugly by the way. If Lan Min really goes all out, then I think Lee Baiken, the licking dog, should burn incense for me and worship me solemnly. After all, I gave him his wish achieved. Hey, I can't help it, I'm just so helpful. Lee Baiken's eyelids twitched. But, is helping others appropriate to use here? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 99. Chapter 99 The Beauty You Think. Look at Lan Yan again. Lan Yan had no way to express his position. After all, in Mary Sue novels, the female protagonist always loves the male protagonist. How could she love the second male lead who licks the dog? So Lan Yan could only say, Sunian, as a woman, why do you not love yourself so much? Do you want your parents to see you like this? I don't love myself. I don't love my husband. Lan, do you think this is ridiculous? Anyway, I think it's ridiculous. If you don't agree with my point of view, okay, you can just ask someone, or even you can take out your mobile phone and record my words. Sunian walked towards Lan Min step by step. You can still help my husband and your good brother solve his physical problems. Lan Min naturally couldn't say these words. Sunian was not surprised at all by Lan Min's attitude. Lan Min looked at Li Baikan again. Baikan, do you care about this? This, Li Baikan felt that if he admitted it, he would be so lustful. But, Lan Min's eyes look like this at this moment, so he must admit it. But before Li Baikan did anything, Sunian suddenly ran over and put his arms around his neck. There are some things that Lan Min you can't give to Baikan, but I can. Ha ha ha, after Li Baikan finishes scolding me, I can go shopping, and I don't have to waste time here with this licking dog. Lan Min stared at Li Baikan closely, wanting to wait for Li Baikan to push Sunian away and scold Sunian loudly. But what she saw was that Li Baikan hugged Sunian tightly. At this moment, Lan Min's face was full of disbelief, as if he had been greatly shocked. Baikan, I didn't expect that you, actually, are such a person. You really let me down. After saying this, he became angry. Leave. Sunian was also confused. What's going on? After all, under normal circumstances, wouldn't it be Li Baikan who reprimanded her loudly? Sunian looked at Li Baikan doubtfully. What kind of plot is this? What is going on with Li Baikan? But it soon dawned on her. I understand, it must be this guy who is indulging in lust. Tisk tisk, why don't you come up with it? Lan Min directly asked Li Baikan if he was playing with her in a sexual way. It would be best if he banged against the wall, it would be best. Li Baikan. He found that Sunian, a woman, really had bad thoughts at every turn. When he listened to Sunian's random words, pictures appeared in his mind involuntarily. Cough cough. Li Baikan coughed heavily several times. Sunian, who was originally thinking wildly, came to his senses immediately when he heard this voice. But when she saw Li Baikan again, her eyes suddenly lit up. Whether this guy is playing hard to get or not, I can use this opportunity to get out my calligraphy treasure. When Li Baikan heard this, he didn't have time to react. He saw Sunian approaching him. Baikan, don't worry, you can do whatever you want to me. Even if you want to ravage me, you can do it. Because I'm not Lan Min, I can do it for you without any reservation. Do anything as long as you are happy. Li Baikan. Li Baikan immediately pulled Sunian in front of him, and then slowly moved closer to her. Then he said in a deep voice, you think so? End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 100. Chapter 100. It turns out that overbearing presidents really have diarrhea. The plan cannot keep up with the changes. Sunian had already prepared a bunch of forced measures. It is planned to execute Li Baikan directly on the spot. But, in the past few days, Sunian watched Li Baikan running to the toilet again and again. Sunian looked at this picture and realized one thing. It turns out that overbearing presidents really have diarrhea. Looking at Li Baikan's appearance, he seemed to be dehydrated. This made Sunian feel a little guilty. She really thought that Li Baikan, the overbearing president, was different from normal. After all, she was in a novel and not the real world. But Li Baikan looks like this. But Sunian didn't know that Lee Baikan was actually annoyed by her the most right now. It was okay because he was not feeling well. When he came out of the bathroom, he saw Sunian sitting on the bed and looking at him with an obedient expression. Then various analyses. Analyze why he has diarrhea. Isn't this nonsense? Who can eat that bowl of food without diarrhea? Lee Baikan came out of the bathroom for the nth time and lay down on the bed weakly. He glanced sideways and saw that Sunian's bed was empty, so he subconsciously looked around. He frowned when he saw no sign of Sunian in the ward. But before Lee Baikan had time to look for it, the door opened. Baikan, this is the porridge I bought, there is some shredded in it, try it and see if it can warm your stomach. When Lee Baikan raised his eyes, he saw Sunian walking in with a bowl of things. Although you have been drinking white porridge these days, I think you should add some shredded ginger, so that it can warm your stomach. Before Lee Baikan said anything, he heard Sunian's thoughts. I went back to cook it specially for him. When I had an upset stomach before, I learned it from the internet. I think I should be fine after drinking it for a few days. Lee Baikan, Sunian did it? This reminded Lee Baikan of what Sunian had done before. Don't worry, Baikan, I didn't make this myself. After experiencing my craftsmanship last time, I understand that it's not worthy of you to drink. And with you like this, I'm also worried that what I made will hurt your stomach. As he said that, Sunian brought the bowl in front of Lee Baikan. And Lee Baikan looked at the bowl of white porridge in front of him. A little afraid to eat it? After all, he now knows that this bowl of white porridge was made by Sunian himself. The last time Sunian cooked by himself, it had a big shadow on him. Sunian felt as though his hands were about to get sore while holding it like this. Just when she thought she might be being sentimental and wanted to take her hand back, her hand suddenly became empty. Lee Baikan brought it over and drank it directly. He thought that no matter how unpalatable the white porridge was, how could it be so unpalatable? Unexpectedly, after eating a bowl of white porridge, my whole body felt warm. The faint smell of in his mouth made him feel much more relaxed. This white porridge, why is it so delicious? It's considered a drink, otherwise it would have been in vain for me to stay up for 2 hours. If I didn't have that little conscience left, then I wouldn't care about this guy. Sunian glanced at her mouth quietly before continuing, Baikan, it tastes good. If you didn't know the way you looked just now, you would have thought I was harming you. This chef's skills are good. Baikan, whatever you think is good. Of course my skills are good, you know, I specialize in practicing. Yesterday, there were a total of 60 recommendation votes. I have not received so many votes for a long time. Thank you all for your support. I will continue to add 6,000. You guys click your fingers and I will code hard. If I pass, the editor may let me continue to add more votes. More, please continue to support me, okay. End of this chapter.